When I was 5, I told my parents that when I grew up I was going to be just like Ellen DeGeneres. And they were like, just like Ellen DeGeneres? So yeah, I'm back, you guys. I'm sorry I've missed the past couple of Fridays, but I'm back now. And this week's topic is really just a personal story, so you guys get to know me a little better. So yeah, I'll try to keep it queer themed. I first realized I had a crush on a girl when I was in preschool. Her name was Ariel. After a pretty bad arts and crafts incident, and I was really bummed out, she came up to me and wore it as a tiara and made it a big joke, and I knew it was true love. At that age, I didn't have any concept of queerness, but I did know that I was different. So I didn't really tell anybody that I was into girls. The way that I processed it at that age was that, well, only little boys like little girls, so I should have been born a boy. So that was when I started sort of acting out in that way. I really resented all the girly stuff that my mom tried to pressure me into wearing and doing. And I started to sort of shut down. I mean, I was always really naturally shy, but by the time I hit kindergarten, it sort of hit its peak. And my kindergarten teacher actually called home because I hadn't said a word to anybody in months. I was okay with telling people silly stories, but the idea of, really opening up to people was really hard for me. So starting at the age of 5, starting to bottle up all of those feelings, it really started to take its toll throughout elementary school. I developed anxiety disorder and trichotillomania, which is a sub-disorder of OCD, where you compulsively pull your own hair out. I didn't find out that the feelings I had for other girls had a name until I was about 7. When my sister Olivia had overheard my parents arguing about it. My mom was convinced that I was a lesbian, and my dad, was really upset by that. And Olivia relayed that information to me, and, immediately, just the way that she said it, then I knew that there was an identity, and that identity had some weight. I started to close myself off even more. I had friends eventually when I hit middle school. I always hid behind all of my extracurriculars, like swimming and violin. So when I hit middle school, and all those hormones start to rage, those feelings I had for girls started to intensify. For a long time, I was convinced that queerness was like everybody said, that, queerness is just, physical attraction, it can be defeated. So, I had a couple of boyfriends for a couple of years, those poor guys. One of whom I dated for 2 years and told him that I couldn't kiss him because my dad was in the army and owned a gun, and he would be really upset if he found out that I was kissing boys. But there was a point in 7th or 8th grade, when I met someone who I thought was absolutely beautiful. And more than that, there was something about her personality. It was the first time that I really wanted to connect with someone. That was a scary feeling. So I distanced myself from her. I just fought it all the more because I was all the more aware of those feelings that I had. So in middle school, all those feelings sort of started to hit at their peak. The internal heterosexism that I felt, I was all the more aware of it, right? Because there was, blatant heterosexism, just among the student body. There was one kid in particular who was abused daily. I was never personally abused, but just bearing witness to it and knowing that I wasn't saying anything against it, started to eat away at me, to the point where one day, this one kid was bullying this other girl, telling her, you're a dyke, just come out and say it. And the next thing I knew, I was on my feet, and I grabbed him and I yelled at him. As soon as I was done shouting and I regained my senses and knew what I was doing, that people were watching, I ran off and hid. And the fact that it affected me so much just hurt all the more. Maybe this is me. The fear of that permanence got me to start taking certain measures, even more dire measures than before. I was plotting ways to end it all. I was reading conservative heterosexist literature. My trichotillomania got to the point where I had various bald spots. It was all adding up. So in a last-ditch effort, I decided to read the Bible because I figured, everyone says that Jesus is against the gays, so I'll read it for myself. And once I do, and I find that I can't reverse these feelings or end these feelings, then then I should end it all. But what I found the message to be overall was just about unconditional love and, loving wholly and treating people well and loving and respecting yourself as well in your entirety. So part of me was elated. The other part of me was kind of disappointed because I was like, well, what the hell do I do now, right? So my next step was I'm going to tell someone I care about, and if they respond negatively, then I'll take those next steps. So the first person I decided to come out to was my oldest sister, Olivia. She's about 6 years older. So at this point, she was already a couple of years into college. She was visiting home, and she picked me up from school. And in the car, she brought the subject around to how great college is. People are so open, people are experimenting with things, people question everything, including their sexuality. And, there was a silence after she said it. And in that moment, I just said, okay, this is it. This is the time I'm just going to come out and say it. And so I said, well, I don't think I'm questioning anymore. And she said, well, what do you think the answer is? And I remember just fighting it. Like the word was right here. I could feel it in my chest, and it was so heavy, and I just didn't know how to get it out. Finally, I just said, well, I'm gay. And I remember the feeling I got as soon as the word came out, it was just out there. And I just couldn't take it back. And there was a silence, and I was convinced, she wasn't going to respond that well. Her first question was, well, how long have you known? And I didn't even have to think about it. I just said, always. And she turned to me and she said, well, there's nothing wrong with you, right? You know that there's nothing wrong with that. I couldn't say anything. I just kind of let it sit there for a while, and she said it again. She just kept saying it. Vicky, there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with you. No matter what mommy and daddy or anybody else has ever said, there's nothing wrong with that. And finally, I knew. This is a part of me, and it's not going away anytime soon. And, I just kind of nodded, and there was a silence, and she said, so, when we get home, you want to watch Mean Girls? I was like, yes, I do. And it was amazing the changes that started to happen after that. With those best friends of mine and with my sisters, I did start to feel more comfortable with being myself. My trichotillomania lessened a little bit, but there was still that anxiety about, my parents finding out. When I started college, for the first time in my life, I was thousands of miles away from the people who knew just about everything about me. I was starting to open up to people, but I still wasn't in that place where I could, just make friends. So my freshman year of college was absolutely miserable. I was completely closed off. So the next year I decided to come out to my parents so I could be a part of the queer community at my school and make the effort to not just come out as gay, but just come out as myself. But my parents took it really well, and I was really surprised. After that, everything started to change. My trichotillomania was at the lowest point it had ever been in my entire life. I was so much happier, and when I started my sophomore year and I went to my very first queer meeting, I remember the nervousness I felt and the excitement and, just being around people who were like me. And eventually the issue wasn't so much just, being queer, it was just being me, and that really happened. I made some really amazing friends, and now I find that my queerness is a total non-issue. When I'm insecure around people now, it's less to do with my sexual orientation and more to do with the fact that I'm just still really awkward in general. So I'm a much better person for it. I've grown a lot. So I hope, for those of you who are questioning or in the process of coming out and are afraid, that you have as much luck as I did. And even if you don't, that you remember that, there are people out there who are going to surprise you. And you shouldn't be concerned with being, a good gay or even, just being gay. It should be about just being the best you can possibly be. On that note, I hope y'all are having a good week. And I'll see y'all next week.